Children are born with the ability to compare and contrast what they see, hear, and experience. It's something they're born with. And as children grow, the adults in their lives teach them formally through classroom education and informally through almost every other experience in life to compare and notice what is alike and what is different. At the same time we teach our children to compare and contrast, we also teach them to think about what is more desirable and what's less desirable. We work really hard to help our children learn how to notice what is different and then how to place a value on what is different. We've all been trained to compare and contrast things, people, personalities, beliefs, skills, abilities, wealth, possessions, and just about everything around us. So it should come as absolutely no surprise when we compare and contrast each other. Who we are, what we believe, and what we possess to everything and everyone around us. It's also no surprise that comparing and contrasting causes us to accept those who are like us, and usually to reject, however subtly, those who are different from us. Well, the Christians in the area called Galatians were comparing and contrasting themselves with all the other Christians in the area. Consequently, while they compared and contrasted, they also accepted and rejected each other, often in very hurtful ways. They were comparing themselves, their beliefs, and their faith with other Christians. As a result, they succeeded in dividing themselves into two groups. Each group accepted and approved of those people who were like themselves, and often painfully rejected those who were not like themselves. Acceptance or rejection in the first century was based on one issue, and that issue was what each group believed was necessary to be included as a Christian. The Christian in Galatia were disagreeing on what beliefs and behaviors were required in order to be included as Christians. And I have to say, I find it both comforting and disturbing that that's how we still function today. We Christians seem to have a need to elevate ourselves while demeaning others by insisting that what we believe and how we behave is the only way to be a real Christian. The particular issue we disagree about may change, but the core issue never changes. What must we do, and what must we believe in order to be considered by others to be Christian? It's a question that has divided Christian churches truly since day one. Now, in Galatia, the issue in the first century was Judaism. Did Christians first need to become practicing Jews in order to be Christians? Did Christians need to be circumcised? Did they need to keep a kosher diet? Did they need to keep the laws of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers? Or was it okay to remain as Gentiles? Did Christians have to practice Judaism to be Christian? Or was faith in Jesus as the Christ enough? Now, that particular question seems kind of easy to answer now. But believe me, it was the hot topic in the first century in Galatia. Comparing what they believed and how they behaved, well, that resulted in a whole lot of separation and even more disappointment. The church was being torn apart because comparing and contrasting resulted in judgment. And judgment resulted in pride, disappointment, inclusion, and exclusion. Judgment meant some believers were in, others were out. It only took 100 years for the church to get beyond that particular issue. Come on, it's kind of funny. Only 100 years. But by that time, another core issue had surfaced. And it only took another couple hundred years to get beyond that one. We do seem to have a propensity for comparing and contrasting in ways that divide us. Now, Paul wrote to tell the Galatians that they were spiritual people, that their goal was to be at one with the Spirit, at one with God. And rather than spending their time on spiritual issues, Paul told them that they were focusing on anything but the spiritual. In fact, Paul said, they were dividing themselves over things that Paul called matters of the flesh, circumcision, food, and church-created rules. Comparing themselves to others was only succeeding in driving them apart. Nobody was getting closer to God. Nobody was helping people grow closer to God. No one was learning more about Jesus, his teachings, and his way of living. They were so busy comparing, contrasting, and disappointing each other and God that they got nowhere. So Paul wrote to remind the Galatians that following Jesus was not about human rules and behaviors. That following Jesus was about faith in Jesus as their Messiah. That faith would help them experience God's love in ways that would transform them, in ways that would change them from the inside to the outside. Paul wrote to say it's God's love, not human rules, that would help Galatians become the people God wanted them to be. It was love, not human rules, that would bring them closer to God and closer to one another. Through the ages, we Christians have used our ability to compare and contrast to either elevate or demean the way others live their Christian faith. We have succeeded in comparing and contrasting our beliefs, our behaviors, our style of worship, and the ways we share our faith with others. Who among us does not cringe when we see two people coming up to ring our doorbell? Who among us does not think about diving behind the sofa so that we cannot be recognized when we see two people walking up with pamphlets, or two people with short-sleeve white shirts and a thin black tie? We have ways of elevating or demeaning each other's behaviors, style of worship, and way of sharing our faith. And Christians have contrasted ourselves into schisms, inquisitions, witch trials, wars, and frankly a Christianity that is losing a whole lot of credibility in people's lives beyond our walls. Lakeshore congregation is the result of the merger of three congregations: Wesley, St. Paul's, and now Emmanuel United Methodist Churches. The main reason most congregations choose not to merge, they choose not to combine their time and their talents and their resources, is because of our human propensity for comparing and contrasting. Congregations tend to focus on things of the flesh, as Paul would say. Our worship space, our worship styles, our decorations, the way we take communion, the color of the hymnals, yes, the color of the hymnals. The treats we serve at coffee time, Sunday school materials we use, which set of United Methodist, bless you, which set of United Methodist women's china we will use. I was in a church in Brookfield that had been merged for 20 years. They still couldn't agree on which set of United Methodist women's china they were going to use. It's true. We have to have a way to compare and contrast ourselves about the songs we sing, what time we worship, and sometimes even the way the pastor dresses. And not one of those things has anything to do with making new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Not one of them. How we love one another makes a difference. How we invite others to worship with us, that makes a difference. How we allow God into loving us, into being the people God has created us to be, that makes a difference. How we embrace and celebrate and worship God, our Creator, Jesus, our Christ, and the Holy Spirit, that makes a difference. How we learn Jesus' teachings and do our best to live His way, that makes a difference. Well, as we grow together into a fully integrated and fully merged congregation, we are going to compare and contrast our stuff. We're going to compare and contrast our worship and our ministry, not to divide us, but to help us understand how we can most effectively make new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We're going to look at how every congregation has done their ministry so we can choose the best practices possible so we can be effective at inviting and encouraging people to be part of our congregation and grow into disciples of Jesus our Christ. We will compare and contrast so that we can focus on our true mission, and that is being spiritual people focusing on spiritual matters. We will compare and contrast so that we can grow together rather than apart. We will compare and contrast so that we can grow together rather than grow into judgment and exclusion and disappointment. We will focus on God's love, God's presence, God's Spirit. We will focus on Jesus' teachings, Jesus' way, Jesus' death and resurrection, and our faith rather than our beliefs, our behaviors, or our likes or dislikes. Because it is the love of God that fills us. It is the love of God that we share that will call us forward into the future. Our mission as Lakeshore Congregation is to expand our ministry into this region and beyond, making new disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And I cannot wait to see where the Spirit takes us next. I cannot wait to see what great work God does with our time and our talents and our money. I cannot wait to see how faith in Jesus our Christ transforms not just our lives, but lives in our community. I cannot wait to see how many lives will be touched by our shared ministry. I cannot wait to see how many lives are transformed as we reach out into this region and beyond. I can't wait to see how well we will work together to grow closer to God, closer to one another, closer to the people in our communities. Not for our honor, not for our glory, not to say, wow, aren't we good, but rather to give honor and glory to our God. Amen.
Amen.